All right, so welcome to Building Developer Tools for Your Coworkers Won't Hate. I'm Amy, and here's Adam. I'm an engineer at Stripe. This is the first time I've ever worn a company t-shirt to a conference, so it might indicate that I actually like them a little bit. I really, really care about doing user experience right when it comes to observability tools, infrastructure tools, anything related to internal tools. You can find my social media and website there. I feel like Connie Lin set too high of a standard with my tweets. You don't have to like them. Here's Adam.
Hi, I'm Adam. I'm an entitled software engineer in practice, site reliability engineer at Nihilus. I'm just excited about making usable software and software that doesn't make me angry.
Yes.
I am mostly on Twitter as NecroBuffalo. I also nominally have a blog. It never gets updated. I think the last time I updated it was talking about how I switched to Hugo. That is the only post. It will get love eventually.
That's a domain name you can never give up, though. I mean, I didn't know you could buy .rip until I saw Taryn's domain name. So it's pretty great. All right, so
we can start the golf jokes now.
Yes, we will have a whole comedian thing going on here. Today we're going to be talking about user experience and building developer tools. So we'll go through motivation for why you should care about this, and then we'll also talk about whatever is the next thing on the slide. I actually have a broken remote right here. It didn't work, so that's why I'm just kind of hoping that we'll advance the slides at the right time. So how to do user research. We'll talk about how to interview people, how to get the right kinds of feedback, and then we'll do a deep dive into 3 different types of tools that you probably are familiar with. Those will be command line tools, data analysis tools, and build tools. And then we'll also have a cat on every single slide, so stick around for the entire talk. All right, so why care?
First of all, bad UX can cause incidents. If say you need to run a database migration, you have a tool for that, and you're like, okay, I want to run this on staging, and then the tool doesn't make it clear to you that you're actually running it on prod. Insert sad trombone here when you take the database out. And all of that time that your site is not up or that you're serving bad data is time that you're losing money. Second of all, it can just waste your time. Any time that your engineers have to spend learning a new tool is time that they're not spending writing good code or reducing technical debt or making your services more reliable. Third, bad UX can create hostility. Every tool that you build that has sharp corners on it, as your engineers learn to deal with those sharp corners, what I've often seen happen is people learn their way around and they get jaded about it and they say, look, I've learned how to do this awful thing really well, therefore I must be great. And you create this culture of resentment between people who are new and just figuring things out and people who have already tripped over all of these things. In other words, the standard that you set with your UI is also the standard that you set for communication within your team.
In this case, Adam's actually subtweeting everyone who uses Vim, including me. So if you know how to escape Vim, you should make it easier for other people to escape from Vim.
I am also a Vim user and still guilty of this, so.
All right, how to do user research. First of all, the great thing about doing user research on internal tools is that all of your customers are inside of your own company. So you don't have to bribe them with gift cards. You don't really have to do anything. You can just put some time on their calendar and call it a day. So the 2 different kinds of talking to people are, first of all, having a one-on-one conversation. Now, the value of having a one-on-one conversation with someone is you get to dive really deep into their specific problems. You want to hear about how they use your tools, what kinds of problems they're actually trying to solve, what kinds of data they're looking at, what their infrastructure looks like. For a lot of different teams, their use cases and infrastructure will be different. So some teams might care a lot about, say, with Kafka, some people will say they want a counter that shows how much offset from the Kafka topic they're at. So that would be a different kind of counter that's always increasing. I learned recently that that's a monotonic counter, and I was like, that's a real fancy word. And some other people might care about gauges, some other people might care about rates, and so all of those are different kinds of data. And so that's the value of talking to a lot of different teams. The other kind of way that you should be talking to people is using focus groups. In a focus group, you should make sure that everyone in the focus group is of the same background. And so you wouldn't put people from, say, web engineering and mobile engineering in the same focus group because they have different sets of problems. So if you get everyone from a specific type of engineering in the room, and not just engineering, we've also done interviews with people from our user operations team, for example, just to hear how they would be using our tools to talk to customers. The point is that you get everyone from the same background in a room and they can talk to each other about what kinds of differences there are in how they're trying to solve their problems. And so you can get a more nuanced look across a field by using focus groups. Another aspect of user research is asking the right questions. And so you want to make sure when you ask a question that you're not asking any leading questions or questions that confirm your own biases. And so in this case, I used to ask people questions like, I hate Jenkins. Do you hate Jenkins? And you're not going to get a neutral response when you frame it that way. I'm really sorry if you work at Jenkins. And so you want to ask, it sounds obvious, but you want to ask really neutral questions like, what do you use Jenkins for? What's good about Jenkins? Where do you have struggles with Jenkins? What parts are confusing? So that people can give their own unbiased answer. The other thing that you should make sure to watch out for is that you don't accept what their first answer is. One example of this is I once ran a trial where we were trying to decide whether to switch to a new vendor. And so for every team that I talked to, I just said, do you like the new tool? And they all said, yes. And then later I looked at the logs and realized that half of them had never logged on to the tool. And that's the great thing about observability. You can tell if people actually logged on to the things that you're using. And so in that case, them saying it was good was a very uninformed answer, and they were just busy, and I should have dug deeper and made sure that they actually were serious about the answer that they were giving. Because if it's the most tempting thing for engineers to do is to not prioritize your work. They want to get back to what they're doing, and so they'll usually give you the shortest answer that will get you to stop talking to them. And if that's going to be, that's okay, move on, and you accept that, then you're going to have a whole world of hurt later when they come back and say, I actually hate that thing. I'm sorry I didn't tell you sooner, but now you have to fix it. And the other really important thing about talking to your coworkers as your user base is that you do need to follow up. I'm sure that this is also very, very important for standard user research interviews, but your coworkers are in the same room as you day to day, in the same Slack room at the very least if you're remote. And so if you keep asking them for feedback and keep interviewing them and taking up your time to do interviews and you don't take action on any feedback that they give, they're going to stop trusting you. So make sure that you at least file tickets that you file tickets for what you want to take action on. Make sure you actually complete those tickets and then tell them, hey, I did that thing that you asked for. And that is how you'll create this virtuous cycle where people will give you feedback on what they want and you will actually do it and they'll keep giving you more feedback. And it will also confirm that your solutions are the right solutions, so you're not off in your own world building the tool that you want for yourself, and that's not the tool that your customers want. And here's the summary. Yeah. Sorry, I am having a hard time making sure that the slides match what I'm saying. All right, command line tools.
So I'm going to go through a couple examples of how this can be done well or badly. So imagine for a moment, or if you're new to Linux, then don't imagine. Imagine for a moment that you're totally new to Linux and you're just learning the commands all over again. And So in your first couple of commands, you probably learned about man. And maybe you learned that you can get help about man by typing man-h. Gives you this nice little usage message. And then you learn about less. And so you try to get help with it from it using that flag, because -h probably stands for help, right? This might work everywhere. And then you see this, and you're sad. And a lot of things like this, as you keep learning, they become background noise to you. However, it's background noise because of the time that you've invested into learning both different ways. If you do, now you've had to spend time learning two different things, instead of where you could have just learned, oh, -h equals help, and then moved on with your day. So within your internal tools, be as consistent as possible. And I'm using the example of command line flags here, but this can also apply to your monitoring tools. If the links to other tools are in one place on all of your tools, put them in the same place on all of your tools as much as possible so that users don't have to go finding what they're looking for every time. Second, match things to historical usage. And here you may have to strike a balance. Like, for example, less has been around for years now. We're not likely to go changing it. However, for your internal tools, maybe you might have an easier time shifting everyone to a new usage. It's really going to depend heavily on your use case. Talk to people, find out what the existing users of your tool would find easiest, but also find out what people who are coming in get confused by and stuck on. Maybe you want to just have two flags that do the same thing. That's fine. So, I'm going to tell a story of of a bug that we ran into at Nihilus. So we have this internal tool. It's the Nihilus CLI. It's just one nice little Python script with click, and it can do a lot of things for you. Basically, if you need to deploy something, if you need to reset your dev database, if you need to SSH into one of our prod machines or something, it can do all of these things for you. And one of the things that I use most often as an SRE is I have it list all of the instances that we have. And when you have a list of instances, sometimes you want to grep through it. And so I went to do this, and there was Python tracebacks everywhere. It turned out that the library that we were using to display color codes and things and make our output look nice and pretty and usable, turns out it didn't support Unicode. And every single one of our internal tools prints emoji. I was a little salty at the engineer who put them in, but they're cute, and turns out they actually help. But we could easily have avoided this if we had written some kind of testing for our internal tools. We didn't necessarily need to make sure that we could pipe it to grep. We just needed to vet the code with, say, this is a TTY, this is not a TTY. So please have integration tests for your internal tools. If two things should work together, you should check that they should work together, that they can work together. Second, if you're starting a new internal tool, make sure you're designing that with your existing tools in mind. If you have a tool that can create a nice list of something for you, and your other tool also needs to list that, to use that information, they should use formats that are compatible, or at least be able to produce similar formats. This is another thing that we ran into internally, where turns out all of our devs were using host names, and that was how they understood our infrastructure, was everything had a host name. They didn't necessarily think about the IP, whereas our ops team was writing all these new tools that only took IP addresses. Didn't understand how to do anything else. And then other people had to use our tools, and, well, we're sitting here like, oh, huh, should have done that correctly the first time. Should have, asked around.
Could have done some user interviews.
And if anytime you're writing a new tool, also make sure that you can preview changes, not just that you can preview changes, but that you always do that first. If your tool is making critical changes to infra, don't let them do that accidentally. Looking at early Terraform here. Sorry for anybody who works at HashiCorp. And all this takes is a confirmation flag. Second, provide diffs of what's going to change. If you provide a diff, then your users can vet whatever changes you're making and make sure that they're not destructive or are what they intended before they run the tool and before they, say, run a database migration on prod and accidentally take the database out.
All right, data analysis tools. This is probably my favorite cat of all of the cats. So does that data really mean what I think it means? So when it comes to data analysis tools, I mean anything that's looking through your databases, observability tools, pretty much anything where your users need to interact with business or operational data. So the first thing is, I need to go to the next slide. Rapid testing. If you have an API and you want me to curl to get data, I'm not going to do it. It's just painful. I never remember all those flags. And so if you don't have some kind of REPL, redevelop, print loop that lets people really quickly just check small amounts of data, it's going to take so much longer for them to actually debug their code. So for example, if let's say you're doing Redshift and you're using that gigantic notebook and you have to write out a reason why you need to open a notebook before you get to the notebook, and then you write a bunch of queries, and it takes forever for you to just get a little bit of data. This is really a rant about Redshift, is what I'm saying. So I'll keep moving. The next thing is that you need to have autocomplete. People will not remember all of the names that they gave to their data. So for example, if you're writing tags and you just don't know if you wrote, what order you wrote the words in, or you have a metric that's system.cpu.usage. Either P90 or 90 percentile, nobody remembers those things. And also, the other problem is that you won't know what's even available to you. So you might have an idea that there's CPU metrics, but you might not have realized that there's also I/O or memory and all of these other things that you might actually care about. Or you might not know that there's error metrics, for example. And so autocomplete will just suggest to the user that there's more that they could be looking for, and it will make it easier.
This can also help with command line tools. If you're learning a new tool, a new tab, and you get a nice list of flags, then that's one thing where you didn't have to go digging through documentation or asking other teams about.
It's just like with Terraform, where you're like dash target equals module dot something dot something dot something, and you don't remember what all of those words are. I would love autocomplete for Terraform. I really hope someone here works for HashiCorp. So along the same lines, have a GUI. I realize that a lot of us are kind of like in the old school ways where like you just type a gigantic command line argument and hopefully things come out. But come on, it's 2018 or whatever its current year is. We can have GUIs. We know how to do web development. Please let people explore your tools using modern technology. The third thing is correctness. I actually think the Rust compiler does a really great job with syntax errors and highlighting. It'll like tell you exactly which part is wrong and why it thinks it's wrong. Meanwhile, other tools will either, well, first of all, they might just crash and give you a gigantic Python traceback instead of actually telling you why it crashed. But second of all, if it crashes, it might just say like failed to parse your code, and then it won't explain to you which exact line or why it failed to parse. So all of these things are just things that will make your users move faster with running your tool. Explanations, I think I covered everything here. Oh, also, you can just hit enter like 3 times, because I know exactly what's on this slide because I'm real angry about it. If you are building an internal web application and you have broken the back button, the refresh button, the links, or the new tab button, I hate your tool. I already know. I don't even care what else is on there. I think I understand why single-page applications are great, but like if you're going to do a bunch of routing through JavaScript, there are absolutely ways to make the back button still work. And if I've been like on your page for like an hour and I hit the back button and I'm looking at my new tab page in Chrome, what's happening here? That means I just lost all of my data. I lost all of my history. I now don't know where I was or what I was even looking at. And I'm trying to tell my coworker, like, hey, could you look at this link for this dashboard? And I look at the URL, and I realize it's actually just like app.somevendor.com with nothing else at the end of it, which means that I can't actually share what exactly I'm looking at. Or if I try to refresh the page, and again, I end up at the home page again, I'm subtweeting like every vendor tool I've ever used. And then if I'm like trying to right-click and open a new tab, or just like trying to command-click or control-click or whatever it is, and it just opens in the current page that I'm looking at, so now I've lost all my data. All of these things are frustrating and horrible, and also pretty bad for accessibility if you actually like care about 10% of your users. So, explorability, I'm real mad about it. Here's the slide. I don't even know why I added transitions, because I thought about it, and I was like, I'm going to rant about all of these together. So, in summary, when you're creating a web application or even a command line tool that deals with data analysis, you need to provide a REPL. You need to provide a way for the people to rapidly test things. Things need to be discoverable, whether through autocomplete or through like some way of listing out what's available to them. You need to have reasonable syntax highlighting and error handling, and also error responses. And you need to make sure that you're not breaking any basic browser functionality. That's also my favorite cat. That one too.
I don't think there's any such thing as like not my favorite cat.
Yeah, actually, all of these cats are my favorite cat. Maybe that's biased. All right, I don't know who broke the build because I don't know how to find the build. This is also about Jenkins, because I just hope someone like sends me the link to where my Jenkins build failed. Otherwise, I don't know. So with tools where you have a lot of different things that people could do. And again, I'm trying to be like charitable to Jenkins here. I realize that you can do a ton of things. Like you can change your build configuration. You can look at where your build failed. You can look at the logs. You can look at history of old builds. And I think all of that's fair. I can see why it's complicated. But you do have to recognize like where are people spending like 90% of their time. And if you know that people generally, for example, want to check the logs of their most recent failed build, make that as easy as possible. how often are people going to be modifying the build configuration for their deploy versus just looking at another build? So make certain actions way more prominent than others in case you, I've lost this train of thought. Yes, that. Oh yeah, locate failing output. And also rebuild, that was a really common action for me. This one's, I mean, part of me felt like maybe this is a job-specific thing, like maybe other companies have better tooling around this, but if your tooling makes it so it takes like 10 minutes for a build to fail, and then you look at the log output, and it turns out that you forgot a comma inside of your JSON, even though that's still valid, you could probably have linted that. You probably could have done that locally. And if you're not suggesting to your users that they do like linting and formatting and unit tests locally, then you're just wasting their time. You don't have to ship the entire thing and then like start off a gigantic deploy that takes like 10 to 30 minutes only to realize that it failed at the beginning. And to be honest, that's the first step. Like linting is the first step. If it's going to fail, you don't have to wait for the rest of the tooling to complete before you report that it had actually failed a minute into the test. This cat's also pretty good. I don't like the hand, though. I don't like people. I'm just trying to fill up the empty spaces here. All right, so as you can see, remind users to lint and unit test before kicking off the long build. Next slide, please. And give suggestions for bad input. Yes, I think we kind of covered this throughout the talk, too.
Yep. So in summary, communicate as early as possible and often with your users. Second, imagine the context in which your users will use your tools. Third, user experience and good design matters even for your internal tools and your infrastructure tools.
This one's my favorite because that means that you grew up and now you're a big tiger. Great. All right, so thank you. That's everything we have. There's one more slide. I forgot there were more cats.